Warp drive active.
You did a bang-up job of clearing out those raptors, adventurer. While you were down there, I happened to notice that one of those beasts stood out from the rest. He was bigger and more menacing.
Docking
I bet he's the one who led
accepted.
the others here to cause the disruption to the dig site. I ask of you now one final task, adventurer. See to it that Sawtooth is brought to justice, and considering the gravity of his crimes, justice in this case means death. Bring me one of his talons as proof of his death.
Oh, good. I have a good glow on my staff now. That's good. Looks good. I don't think my spell density is what it is where it should be. I think my spell density should be everything, and the particle density. Yeah, I want it on ultra. Yeah. Yeah, much better. I'll go to the trainer, that's right.
A true professional know his limitations, and I'm not ashamed to admit that your skills exceed mine. I want you to pay a visit to Kida Firewind at the Tower of Azora. She is well-renowned, and with good reason.
I'm afraid I have nothing to teach to someone with your experience. But you haven't reached the end of the road yet. Speak to Lucan Cordell behind the counter there. He'll guide you through. I sell only the finest arcane.
A true professional know his...
Let's turn my heat down. It's up a bit too high. get a spoon, did I? Damn it. I'll go get one. I got a yogurt and a couple of Hershey's. Had to go pee, sorry. Oh no, the furrier's kidding me. No. Get on him. Okay. Chocolate. Let's find a good video. Oh yeah. Okay, what's going on?
Can't see a damn thing.
Thank you,
Ugh.
Jason Graves, for the excellent
Ugh,
content for my
what?
stream. I'd like to sub
Oh.
to your channel.
Yeah, alright, this one looks fine. Greetings and welcome everyone to Jason's Tavern and Inn. Sit down, rest yourself a spell, and I'll pour you a nice glass of Margaritaville classic margarita. I don't know what this is. It's green. It reminds me of the cucumber flavored Gatorade. And that stuff's terrible, so this is probably terrible too. So maybe we'll forget about the drink. Maybe, how about a game instead? What? Every bar doesn't just have the Ultima trilogy on NES set up and ready to play? So Ultima is like the granddaddy of the role-playing game. You hear all about the Final Fantasies and the Dragon Quests and whatever, but they got their start with Ultima years before any of those games existed. But I'm not a PC gamer. I'm a fucking Nintendo console baby, so... Plus, I think those are more interesting. The Ultima PC games have kind of been done to death, but nobody's really taken a look at the NES version, so... Here you go. Now's your chance to play some Ultima. So take the controller. Oh, what's that?
Why would you throw that controller like that?
Looks like you dropped something, man. Oh, right. Oh, right. You're not real. Oh, so I guess I'm going to have to play the game instead. Ultima Exodus is an adaptation.
Why would you toss the controller like that? It's like a sacrilege. When you toss the controller, it made me sick, kind of. No. Fallout, a quarter century later. Matt's XP. Fallout, a quarter century later. Thank you for the excellent content for my stream. I'd like to sub to your channel.
Over pizza at night after people were supposed to go home. It was the only time I was allowed to talk to people because they were assigned to other projects, and other producers were getting upset if I came by and talked to their guys about anything. So what I would do is I would buy pizza, go sit in the conference room around 6:30, and if anybody wanted to come in there and talk Fallout, they were welcome to do so. An awesome thing I wanted to point out here, though, that happened was in the last 6 months that Fallout was being developed, a lot of the people who were in QA volunteered to come in on the weekends and work for free. And this is in an environment where if you were a QA member at Interplay, you could come in on the weekend and get time and a half or even double time by working on assigned projects. But these people would come in and work on Fallout for free. And I just wanted to point that out because I was flabbergasted that there were these guys who didn't make a lot of money, and they're like, nope, I'd rather get all the bugs out of your game than come in and work on the game I'm assigned. And I just thought that was amazing. So marketing was convincing Brian Fargo to cancel it because it was too competitive. In the end, I went into Fargo's office and I basically begged. I got down on my hands and knees and I begged him to let's make this game.
I don't think I can clearly express how we're able to perceive it, but there are some games that you can really feel the passion that was put into them. It just oozes out. There's a certain charm to them. You just sense it as the player. I felt it when I played The Witcher 1 a couple years ago, and that game compelled me to make my first video. I felt it when I played the original Demon Souls last year, and boy, did I feel it throughout the 40 hours it took me to finish Fallout 1 for the first time.
40 hours?
A quarter century after its release. You could imagine
40 hours. You beat that game in 40 hours? I don't believe you. You walked through.
then how little surprised I was.
My best friend played this game incessantly for like 7 years, and trust me, 40 hours isn't shit.
To hear those words from Tim Kaine in his 2012
Docking request
GDC talk,
accepted.
because you can tell while you're playing Fallout that it's a game made by dudes who brainstormed its inception after hours over pepperoni pizza. Because let's be honest, if it was pineapple
Maybe in
pizza,
your
this game would be
incessant,
you
like,
can tell just from playing that it's a game.
Fantasy nerd dream. They're all sitting around eating pizza and designing Fallout. And I'm sure some gamer vision culture was like that, you know. But mostly you're probably just crouched over a computer crunching. 15 hours a day. You know. You have this fantasized view of it.
Testers would sacrifice their weekends for, willingly, just so they could try and finish the game before their save data was wiped the week after. You can tell just from playing that it's a game whose initial sole creator would be willing to get down on his hands and knees and beg to get the game through the door, out of the hands of marketing, and into the hands of actual players like you and me. Because as barren and desolate as the Southern California wasteland might be, damn does it have one strong beating heart. In this video, we're going to talk about what makes Fallout 1 so special, going through the game from start to finish. If you haven't played the game yet, stay tuned for a little longer because I do have some things I want to tell you if you're on the fence about playing such an old game, which I know can be a hindrance. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, as it'll, 1, let me know this video is worth making, and 2, it'll help the channel out a great deal. And shares on social
There's
media are
another
also
50 million or
incredibly
something.
appreciated. But with that,
30, oh no,
please
40. It was
sit
like
back,
37.
relax.
Not
and enjoy.
bad, not bad.
You're awake. How about that? Whoa, easy there, easy. You've been out cold a couple of days now. Why don't you just relax a second?
I think we all have a story about how we got into the Fallout franchise, which games we've played, which we've missed out on, and so forth. So let me start by briefly giving you some context about my history with Fallout, and I think it'll help give some fullness to my words as we move along. A little over a year ago, I played Fallout New Vegas for the first time and absolutely fell in love with it, so much so that I made a 4-hour video detailing my experience with it, which I'll link to if you're interested. But simply put, it's one of the greatest gaming experiences I've ever had. The storytelling, the decision making, the faction system, the world building, all of it was incredible. I had played Fallout 3 many years prior, but I rushed through it in preparation for Fallout 4 back in 2015, which I did play that as well, and I quickly bounced off of that at the time, not necessarily because I thought it was a bad game. I was just really busy with college and I had stuff going on. But anyway, earlier this year I had gotten that itch to go back to the nuclear wasteland. I wanted to give Fallout 3 more attention this time around and replay it with a closer eye, really trying to see all that there is to see in the game. This now about to be my second detailed Fallout playthrough, I also wanted to get some true appreciation and understanding for the lore, because it's easy to pick up the gist when it comes to Fallout games. You're exploring the remains of an empty, bleak wasteland off the heels of a man-made nuclear apocalypse. Society has effectively killed itself, and you're a lone wanderer wandering through the remains of it. And there's also the stuff painted on top, like the retro future aesthetic, stuff deeply embedded with it, like the dark and humorous undertones. But I wanted to dive deeper than even that. You know, what's the story behind the super mutants, for instance? How did iconic factions like the New California Republic and the Enclave, how did they come to be? What's the story behind the Great Khans and the raiders that plagued the wasteland? And so on. And as I was researching the lore and the background for Fallout 3 specifically, I came upon a 2007 Bethesda dev blog titled Welcome Back to Fallout. In it, our almighty overlord, God Howard, writes about the inspirations that went into the development of Fallout 3. Obviously, we had the old games to look at, and Fallout 1 became our main model and inspiration. I always preferred the tone of it, and it's the one we focused our time on dissecting. I already was interested in playing the pseudo-isometric Fallout games, despite some of the rumblings I've heard about them not being the easiest to go back and play, which, at least for Fallout 1, I strongly disagree with, but I'll get to that. However, reading those couple of sentences from the blue-eyed, chisel-chinned relative of Gandhi himself, it gave me the final push I needed to commit. In order to be able to more richly talk about Fallout 3, I bought OG Fallout, installed OG Fallout, and launched OG Fallout. Thing is, and this is a very important point I want to make about this video, is that I really had no intent in making this. I wanted to make a video on Fallout 3. You know, maybe a Fallout 1 video would come down the line, but it wasn't in my priority. I wanted to do, you know, a simple playthrough for the experience and the appreciation, and to be able to better speak on the leap from pseudo-isometric to first-person / third-person perspective we played in today, to have some gameplay footage to reference, to discuss changes in the systems, changes in tone and writing, and so forth. It was largely academical. But once I had sunk my teeth into this game, I'm telling you guys, all that had changed. I knew I had to make a video on it. So if you haven't played Fallout 1 yet, I want to speak directly with you for a moment. My advice is plain and simple. Forget this game and go play Fallout 76. Get this game. Especially if you're a fan of the later games, but are a bit timid to go back to the classics, get it and try it. And put a couple hours into it, and I think you'll realize that it's not as scary to go back to a game like this as you might think after all these years, which I know, like a lot of people, they don't want to play older games because they're afraid it might be too dated, and I realize this is
Afraid it might be
based
too
off
dated.
preconceptions.
You mean clunky and one-shots and old base systems that they don't use anymore, fucking jank and having to install like compatibility things or window full screen thingies or any of that.
I had prior to playing.
Yeah, don't worry, that's fine. Don't worry about any of that, you know.
But the game actually didn't feel nearly as dated.
You
as
kill
I
my
thought it would,
tiger, you
apart
son of
from
a
the
bitch.
UI. The UI does feel old and clunky. And are there odd cultural references
Yes.
that can feel stale? Sure. Maybe if you catch on to them. You probably won't, though, unless you know your 97 pop culture very well, which I myself cannot say I'm an aficionado in. But I think you'll be happy to know that Tim Kaine thought about people like you and me getting into the game for the first time today when he was making the game.
A big problem we had, I told you we were very much media sponges on the team. Everybody wanted to put their own cultural reference stamp into the game, whether it was a TV show they liked or a movie that they liked, or even other games they were playing. They wanted to put little inside jokes in so that people playing the game would go, oh, I know what they're talking about.
Warp drive
I was
active.
worried that not only would we lose players when we had that, but RPGs tend to sit on the shelf for years, and I was afraid we'd look dated. So I made a rule, and the rule for that was if you put in a joke or a cultural reference, if the player didn't get it, they shouldn't even know that that joke or cultural reference was being made.
As for the gameplay, there's a certain cerebral aspect to the combat in this game that gets diminished in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. And I grew up and love my first-person shooters. Do not get me wrong. I have like 5,000 to 10,000 hours probably on CSGO, Rainbow Six, Overwatch, PUBG, all those games. And frankly, I'd still rather play Fallout 4's combat than Fallout 1's. And I'm not saying Fallout 1 is a rocket science in real time, or I guess turn-based rocket science. There's got to be a game like that out there, right? But it's hard to replicate the analytical qualities that are present in tactical turn-based RPGs when you try to translate that into first-person games. And that's where I think this game's strength lies, in the combat. There aren't a lot of skill points to go around. You're not going to be able to max out every skill, get all the best perks. No. You really have to decide what type of archetype you want to be and commit to it, especially early on. So really take the time to think about the character you want to create, the person you want your role to be, because that decision is actually meaningful in this game, and I love that. It puts the role into RPG, or role-playing game. You know, I mean, when you boot up Fallout 1, you're playing a true RPG classic. You're just going to feel it when you play it after all these years. The influences, you're going to see it, the direction that the series has gone and the games after it. If you played those games before this one, you're going to feel it. And I'm just going to reiterate, if you're a fan of the Fallout franchise and haven't gone back yet, do it.
Warp drive
Because in
active.
addition to the incredible 40-hour or so experience you're going to get trying to save Vault 13, you're going to gain a new appreciation for the Fallout world and a new appreciation for video games overall. I know I did.
War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes.
For an intro that was written during the commercial breaks
Docking
of a
request
Simpsons episode,
accepted.
the night before the assistant producer was to bring it to Hollywood for Ron Perlman to read, I'd say Tim Kaine did a pretty damn good job, not only just because you'd be hard-pressed to find a more iconic opening phrase in all of video games, but because it's very punctual and it brings the tone down to a darker place that adequately fits the world the player is about to explore.
In 2077, the storm of World War had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders. And from the ashes of nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. A few were able to reach the relative safety of the large underground vaults. Your family was part of that group that entered Vault 13.
After having just watched a darkly humorous intro, seeing men in big suits of armor shooting what looked to be a civilian on his knees with his hands tied behind his back, then watching the guy in the power armor wave at the camera a moment later, we're now plunged into a grimly serious reality of the state of the game's world. And I want to make that distinction clear because, yes, this game there's a lot of dark humor in it, but the world really is just dark. It's just dark. I think it's the dialogue and the writing that really makes the humor part stand out, but the world is absolutely gloomy. In this intro, we're recounting the tragedies of human history, and this is all before being dropped into perhaps the most terrifying thing in this game, the character creation screen. It features more letters and numbers than the 3rd page of a linear algebra midterm exam. This screen should have came with a laminated sheet of paper filled with formulas.
Wow.
Okay, Okay, wait, maybe it did. The character creation screen is both extremely intimidating and incredibly liberating. Not just because of all those characters tightly packed onto what might have been a 640 by 480 resolution at the time. Okay, that's the actual scary part, but because you have to figure out what everything means. Then you have to figure out which skills, which things you want to allocate your points to. And if you're not looking things up about the game beforehand, you're pretty much taking a stab in the dark on what's going to be important and what's not going to be. How important is repair going to be? How important is barter going to be? What the hell does outdoorsman even mean? Is putting points into gambling worth the opportunity cost? When will I even be able to gamble? When will I get access to my first energy weapon or big gun? Will I be okay if I don't put a lot of skill points into combat skills early on? And the background music while you're making all these tense, stressful decisions is not exactly Jingle Bell Rock, so that only adds to the stress. But at the same time, much of what makes this process so stressful is simply a byproduct of what makes this medium unique and special in a way, and what makes RPGs one of my favorite genres. What makes this dev team and their core beliefs so outstanding.
Well, it's really interesting. Like everything else that kind of just somehow magically coalesced. We were sitting in a room and we decided that, if you're making a role-playing game, it should be about you playing the game any way you want to play it. The more we can let you do whatever you want, the more successful the game will be in our eyes. And we've never lost that. Like all the stuff we tried to do at Troika, when we designed Fallout 2 before we left, it was all about player agency and giving the player the ability to play in a world, hopefully interesting world, where he can play any character he wants and the game will accommodate that. And that includes the consequences. We take it to extremes at time, like Arcanum. We went as far as we could with such a small team. But I think that's still at the core of our game making ethos is that we really love making games where you can play the character that you want to play.
That's Fallout art director Leonard Boyarsky on a Dev Game Club podcast he and Tim did back in 2016. Absolute banger episode. I'll have that linked in the description. But honing back in on those words we just heard from Leonard, if there's one thing I appreciate most about the Fallout dev team, it's their dedication to allowing you to play how you want to play. Tim talks about how he wanted the player to be able to have the option to talk their way through situations, fight their way through situations, and stealth their way through situations. He says that they tried to allow you to have the option to do at least 2 out of 3 in each of the side quests, and all 3 in the main quests. So that's a testament to the degree of freedom and agency they want the player to have over their character and the world that their character is in. But that raises the question for you, the player. When you press on the character...
Oops, I closed it. Aw, I didn't mean to.
When you press on the character creation button, what type of character do you want to have? How do you want to play this game? For me, I usually bias towards speech and lore-oriented builds, so like, a science skill or a lockpick skill that'll unlock a back room to hack into a terminal that'll give you more information about the place you're in, stuff like that. That's the way I skewed on my first playthrough, but having the myriad of options available, your base special points, your skills, your trades, it allows you to create the perfect persona you want to command over. And ultimately, it's the interactions in the actual game world and how the devs make use of these point allocations and abilities the player chooses to go with that really determines the utility that the system brings. So we'll have to see how it all comes together.
You're here. Good. We've got a problem. A big one. The controller chip for our water purification system is giving
I
up
want
the
some
ghost.
more. I want more.
Another one. The process is too complicated for a workaround system. Simply put, we're running out of drinking water. No water, no vault. This is crucial to our survival.
Docking request accepted.
I think you're the only hope we have. controller chip. We estimate we have 4 to 5 months before the vault runs out of water. We need that chip. You marked your map with the location of another vault. Not a bad place to start, I think. Look, just be safe. Okay?
And so, your character's exploration impetus is given. You need to find a controller chip for the water purification system to help keep your vault alive, all within a time constraint. An important point we'll talk about in depth in a little bit. But ultimately, it is you, not anyone else, who is tasked with leaving the vault, venturing into the wastes, and putting yourself at risk.
Oh.
Because, as the Overseer puts it, you're the
Damn
best
it. How
chance
did I
the vault
manage
has.
that? Oh, because...
Why are you the only hope your vault has? Well, because you're the player character, of course, but let's look beyond that. I get this may sound like taking it a bit overboard, but I like to think that you have to use your imagination here as to why the Overseer selected you by tying his reasoning to your character's strengths. If you're a strong physical build, then the Overseer thinks you're well suited to deal with the harshness of the wasteland. If it's because you're intelligent, then your smarts and wits make you best suited in the Overseer's eyes. If you're well-rounded, well, you're just the overall best person for the job. But ultimately, you create your own backstory. You defined in your character creation screen what makes you A-slips.
And since the system we
Vault
eventually
drive
developed had
active.
these 7 stats: agility, charisma, endurance, luck, intelligence, perception, and strength. So I said, well, just put them in that order, and it spells A-slips. That'll be the name of our system. That lasted a day until Jason Swin, one of the other designers, came in and said, you know, you can rearrange those letters, make the word special, and everybody likes that a little better. I've never forgiven him for that.
And this is the first chance you get to get into your roleplay. But no matter how good of a story you create for yourself, you weren't the first person to leave your vault. There's someone who left before you. No doubt, the corpse is there to forewarn the player that it's a dangerous world, but I initially thought it was
Docking
because someone
request
else
accepted.
had gone after the water chip before you. In the Fallout Bible, however, which is a collection of documents containing background material for the first Fallout games, compiled, written, and released by Chris Avellone in 2002, it stated that Ed, the corpse outside the vault door, was sent out before the water was malfunctioned, since he's just bones at this point. So we're not exactly sure why Ed was sent out. It's left a mystery. But is he the only person before us who was sent out? Could there be other Vault 13 veterans in the wasteland? It's a mystery the player is left to keep in the back of their head. There isn't much to do or see here, apart from killing 20 rats that'll simultaneously net you half the XP you need to level up, whilst teaching you the basics of how combat works, which I know for me helped me out a ton because the combat buttons and mechanics were not intuitive to me whatsoever at first, even having read the manual, so it does its job in that regard. One final note about the beginning of the game that I want to share is the aspirations for what it was supposed to be. In the Origins of Fallout, an extensive article documenting the origins of Fallout, written by Scott Campbell, a Fallout designer who, according to the Fallout Wiki, wrote much of the story for the game and laid out many of the major non-player characters and locations. The article, written in 2012, is definitely worth a read if you want some history on interplay and some fun facts about the development, but what I want to highlight here is what he writes on page 6 regarding the game's opening. The beginning of the game was intended to be a lot more interactive. Instead of just a movie of the Overseer, the plan was to start the game in Vault 13. You would start out in your room, with pleasant music playing and a computer voice prompting you to dress and go to work. Your closet is full of Vault jumpsuits, all the same color. As you leave for work, people dressed exactly like you wave and say hello. You pass some people complaining about the taste of their water. Where you work depends on the skills you assign to your character: security guard, scientist, maintenance worker, Vault PR. You are able to pick up a few items in the vault and talk to as many people as you like. People are generally nice, but in a malaise. If you are afraid of the, quote, water problem, but seem a little scared to mention it in public, luckily, your utopian boredom is quickly brought to an end. The Vault's Overseer calls you into his office. He explains that the Vault's water purification chip has burned out. It's only a matter of time before the water recycling will become toxic. The Vault's central computer has chosen you, as the citizen most likely to succeed in leaving the vault and returning with the chip. After this, you can gather whatever supplies your character can beg, borrow, or steal. The people know you are going and hope for
Docking
your safe
request
return.
accepted.
Some are anxious to hear of news of the outside world. Others think only death awaits you. As the muddy vault doors grind open, you enter the tunnels leading out, and that's where the shipping game actually begins. Man, would that have been cool. I mean, would it have slowed the beginning of the game? Certain. And maybe it would have made repeat playthroughs briefly more of a
Shitty.
slog at the start. I know that's
Shitty.
an issue some people
Yep,
have with
it
Fallout
made it
3's opening,
shitty.
but in the same vein, I think it would have added so much to the world building. A deeper
Nope.
dive into who it is you
It's
are,
Helgen,
where it is you
what
come
they're
from,
talking
what your
about,
story
and
is.
Helgen sucked.
It's part of why I love Fallout 3's opening, despite how slow it can be. Forget killing kids, this is the type of content that really hurts to not have. But such is the life of game development.
Docking request accepted.
I was astonished at how large the overworld map was. Or at least how large it felt. You're in the center of a 3x3 grid with blocks upon blocks of black surrounding you, and the mystery of what's out there in those hidden squares, and what those hidden locations are in the sidebar. It got me so excited. It's that feeling that I love about open world games. And make no mistake, this is truly an open world game.
We always said we wanted an open world. We called it that before the word sandbox came out. I think it Fallout was known today. People would say it was a sandbox game. We just said, we don't care where people can go. They can go anywhere they want. If they go into some area that's too strong for them, they'll get killed. And then they'll learn not to go in there yet. And they'll look forward to the challenge of being able to go back. We wanted a non-linear story so the player could choose wherever he could go and the story would still unfold. And so the onus was on us for making sure that the stories could unfold that way.
It's not a conjoined open world. You can't reach every location without breaks into menu screens, so maybe it's not an open world in the way that we think of
Warp
the
drive
physical open
active.
worlds of today, like Skyrim, Hyrule, and Breath of the Wild, games like that. But it is open in the sense that you can go anywhere. You can do anything you want right from the start, and nobody can stop you, apart from your character's abilities and limitations. And while I was only one at the time, my guess is that for a game released in '97, that freedom probably wasn't too frequent in a lot of those games at the time.
Wow.
So the vets who are watching this, you're going to have to corroborate that for me, but it certainly impressed me playing it all these years later that a game released before the turn of the century had this amount of openness. Obviously, Shady Sands being a point on the line segment between you and Vault 15 is deliberate, but I still decided to venture into the neighboring vault because that's where the Overseer wanted me to
Docking
start.
request accepted.
Unfortunately, I chanced into my first Rad Scorpion on the way there.
You've been poisoned. That's not good. What are you gonna do?
But after fighting him to a near death, I managed to safely get away, thank the heavens.
Rest in peace.
After entering a
Oh
lone
my God.
shack in the middle of nowhere, solely containing a single descending ladder that leads down into a cave, you find a bunch of varmints and a broken off vault door. Upon entering, I remember thinking to myself how much the music had augmented the atmosphere down there. And this is literally the case throughout the whole game. Every location's track, adds so much to the place you're exploring and uncovering the mysteries of. Here's Tim talking a bit about the music.
Ambient music, I'm a huge fan of it. I didn't want standard game music in Fallout. I kind of wanted something, I think I wrote this next one wrong. I didn't want something you listened to, I wanted something you heard. Something you would play the game and miss when it wasn't there, but not necessarily be prominent while you were playing. And I wanted to underscore that the game was desolate and have a sad undertone to the thing. Again, marketing wasn't sure. They came here a few times and said, are you sure you want this music? Because it's kind of depressing. And I said, if you play the game, everybody's dead in the world, it should be depressing.
A lot is made out of the tone of the Fallout games. It's both humorous and incredibly dark. While I'd say there's generally a fair balance with an emphasis on the dark, much of the dialogue writing, apart from the voice acting, felt skewed towards comedy. Even if you don't pick the dialogue choice, you still read it, and that's enough to give you a chuckle. And in contrast, the art, the atmosphere, and especially the music, it felt skewed towards horror. Tim's talked about how he would listen to ambient music while he worked on the game.
Since we worked really long hours, and it's hard for me to code with so much activity, but I didn't want people not to be active, so I would put on headphones and listen to ambient music. And we were working on it for 3.5 years. As the years went by, I bought darker and darker ambient music. And I have this one, I still listen to it occasionally. It's called like ambient isolationism.
Oh my god.
And so what I started doing is if I was listening to a piece that I particularly liked, I would rip it and put it in a folder, rip it into an MP3 and put it in a folder. And so when our audio director came to me, probably about 9 months before it was supposed to ship, he was like, hey, I need to talk to you about music ideas. And I'm like, here you go. Here's a whole bunch of, here are ones that I think would sound good in combat. Here are ones that I think would sound good on certain levels. And the only thing I told him to do was, okay, we can't copy these pieces. But I said, and he was in touch with Mark Morgan, who's a really amazing composer. I said, have him make new pieces that sound like they would belong on a CD with these pieces. And he sent him all the music, and we got back amazing stuff. And you can kind of hear Aphex Twin, Brian Eno. You can hear little elements of that in the Fallout soundtrack. I think there's even a Depeche Mode siren going off in there somewhere.
The haunting aura, screeching inside your headphones as you wonder what happened. To leave this vault as empty and torn apart as it is, crawling with wasteland wildlife. The game and music go so well together. It is in Vault 15, within my first hour of playing the game, that I, to no surprise of my own, being that I was playing a 1997 CRPG, hit my first roadblock that I had to figure out a way around, and I had little to no hand-holding or guidance. There was a message on the Pip-Boy console that read, "The elevator shaft is not easily descended without a rope," so it was clear I needed a rope. So I just had to find one. I couldn't find one in the vault, but luckily I did know there was a whole location I passed by on my way over here that was available for searching. And so searching for a rope over there became my next objective. Arriving at Shady Sands kind of felt like opening Doc Mitchell's door to Good Springs. Just a simple town of good-natured people living day to day. Nothing too exciting going on here, but relative safety compared to the rest of the wasteland. Apart from the rad scorpions and raiders Seth, the town guardsman, was telling me about. I chose to barter with him, hoping to find a rope, and fortunately there it was. In case the player doesn't think to open barter with Seth, though, there are also 2 other places within Shady Sands you can find the rope. I know it might not seem like much. What is essentially the key to the main location is found in a secondary location that pops up on the way to the primary one. But just that sense of doing it myself, however small the task, is something I've come to appreciate in an age where problem solving in games is, let's face it, more streamlined than ever. Unless you go out of your way to turn off the HUD, Too many games today, I think, reduce quests down to a series of GPS route navigations that are interrupted with breaks of gameplay and cutscenes, all while a minimap takes up the entire corner of your screen. It doesn't even feel like you're playing a game, it feels like you're mechanically carrying out tasks assigned to you by your boss over Skype at 9 a.m. That's not the case here, at least not entirely. Okay, maybe it kind of is. Are there drawbacks to this level of openness? Sure. And honestly, settings are probably the best way to reach a happy medium in this, but personally, I can't express enough how refreshing it is to do quests in a less guided, more freeform manner instead. It's sort of like a small sample to the openness in the main quest to find the chip. The stage had been set. The game trusted me to figure out things on my own terms. With a rope now in my inventory, I had what I needed to progress through Vault 15. But before I went back and searched for the chip, I decided to make the most of my time while I was here and chatted around hoping to uncover more information about the wasteland I was likely getting set to explore. Also, traveling takes time, meaningful amounts of time, given we only have 150 days to find the chip. Thus, not having to retrace your steps is really beneficial, so I kept talking around. Welcome to Shady Sands, traveler. My name is Katrina. My job is to greet strangers and help them understand our village. We find there are fewer problems if you listen to what I have to say. Tell me more about yourself. My life was very boring. I was raised in a vault. I lived there for many years. Unfortunately, we were crowded and life was very bad. There was a schism and many people left, taking with them the best equipment. Still, some of us tried to stay in the vault, but then we were attacked. I was hurt, and I ended up here. Now I try to help people. Where was this vault of yours? It was Vault 15. It is due east of here. We tried to make contact with some other vaults, but we always failed. I think it was the raiders who attacked my fellow dwellers. Be careful. She goes on to explain basic game mechanics like healing, looting, and bartering, also pointing you in the direction of Ian, a potential companion, when asking her about the outside world since she isn't well traveled herself, but Ian is. We'll talk about him and add him to the party here in a second, but I want to add some more context to Katrina's story and the story of Shady Sands, Vault 15, and the Raiders as a whole. As we'll discover, Shady Sands is a very important location in the Fallout universe for reasons that become clear at the end of the game, and that help lead into Fallout 2, but as it turns out, Vault 15's history is really what sprouts it all. As Katrina alluded to, the vault had a lot of people in it and became overcrowded. Conditions deteriorated, population control was not implemented, and by 2097 the vault was jam-packed to the point of producing poor living conditions. Conflicts arose, and in the spring of that year, the situation exploded. As Katrina mentioned, the people in the vault had a schism. Many people in the vault sought life up on the irradiated surface instead of down in the vault, and on their way up there, they took many of the vault's belongings with them. One of these was the all-important Garden of Eden Creation Kit, or GEC, which is a terraforming device that contains the basic amenities needed to establish a post-nuclear settlement. It was the GEC that created Shady Sands, and those who did not eventually start life anew in the settlement banded into one of the three raider tribes we know today as the Vipers, Jackals, and Khans. However, though many people rose to the surface following the vault's kerfuffle, there were still people who stayed in the vault like Katrina, and as she said, she and the people of the vault were attacked. And it was this attack that led to the broken vault door, the tremors of the attack leading to the rocks collapsing into the sections of the vault that are inaccessible today, and eventually its destruction and abandonment. There was simply no safer place to go within the vault's vicinity than the town of Shady Sands, located only a few days away by foot. Shady Sands truly, then, was a second chance at life, hence the name of the area's theme. Heading into the building to the east, we enter into another conversation with an NPC. Welcome, stranger. We don't see your kind often. Yeah. Look, Shady Sands don't need your kind from the hub or Junktown or wherever you come from. We do pretty good by ourselves. The last trader from the hub sold us a malfunctioning irrigation pump. We've had it with your dirty deals. You got it all wrong. I'm not like that. Well, maybe you aren't. you do seem a little different to me. I'll tell you what, you should go talk with Aradesh. He's in the center of town. See ya. Most of the people in Shady Sands are simple folk. They don't travel or raid neighboring places. They just want to live in peace on their self-sufficient, humble terrain. And when strangers come in and screw them over by hurting them like the raiders do, or by doing dirty deals like the guy from the hub that this person was referring to, I started to develop a bit of empathy for the varying degrees of xenophobia that come across when you go from town to town. Subtle combos with random NPCs that add world building like that one really separate good RPGs from the great ones. And these days you can get that from overhearing combos between NPCs, like listening to two peasant women talk about how to get food in The Witcher 3, for instance.
Heard you can get food from this man. Oh, you know? You just gotta sleep, my little lad. I'll give you a nod.
But 18 years prior to the release of that game, these direct conversations still work just as well at building the world. In the same building, you'll find your first mate in the wasteland, a blue jean leather jacket wearing greaser named Ian. A former Crimson Caravan guard, Ian was shot and wounded on a routine caravan route. The people of Shady Sands helped him recover, and he's been staying with them ever since. He tells you about a couple of places in the wasteland he's visited, places named The Hub and Junktown, opening new location markers on your map for you to explore now that you're aware of them. This is one of the neat things that I love about Fallout games. It's not unique to them in any way per se, but when you talk to a stranger and they tell you about a place and it's marked on your map now, it just feels like you're uncovering the world around you, like you're slowly understanding the landscape of this world that is completely foreign to you since you've been in a vault your whole life. And this is actually better exemplified in Fallout 3 and Fallout 1 than it is in New Vegas. In New Vegas, you're a courier, so you have some general understanding of the world's landscape. Whereas in Fallout 1 and 3, the Vault Dweller you're playing as is completely unfamiliar with the world above, just like you are. Furthermore, there are only a dozen notable locations in the game, so when you learn about a new one, you know it's important, and you become all the more curious to check that place out. As open world games continue to grow in size, which I'm not opposed to, so long as the content doesn't suffer too much for it, I think there's something to appreciate about a world with less locations that are more dense, like Fallout's. The locations then become more memorable, more purposeful, rather than thinking back on a game's world and only recalling a set of sparsely laid out, superficial locations. I was super excited to have a new friend join alongside me on my travels, so excited that I felt a sudden urge to take a tinkle. I headed to the Shed Outback. Thankfully, the GET concluded this and its deployment.
Greetings. Your business in Shady Sands might be...
I'm certain the 21 Talking Heads added a ton to the game's immersiveness. It really brought me into the game seeing a close-up of the most important characters and hearing them talk versus a wholly sprite-filled game, probably more than I'd think going in. Just hearing actual words being spoken by some of the people brings everyone else to life a little bit more. It connects you to the game a little bit more, but me, if I didn't get jump scared half the times I opened dialogue with a talking head NPC for the first time. It turns out the talking heads were actually really time consuming to make. I'll let Tim Kane talk about the process.
The talking heads, when you're playing the game and you see those heads that pop up and they're one free detailed and they have voiceover. This was Leonard Boreski's idea, but they were pretty much implemented by another artist named Scott Rodenheiser. Scott would actually form a clay head, heat it in a kiln, and then he would sit there with a 3D scanner, a point scanner, and hit point by point by point by point by point on this head for hours, days at an end, until we had a 3D model which looked like the one in the upper left there. Then we would add the polygons, add the color, and light it. That entire process on here, just to go from the clay model to the one at the bottom right, took about 8 weeks. And then it was another 2 or 3 months to get all the phoneme matching done for all the voiceover that was done. It was probably 4 man-months per head, which is why we only had, I think, a dozen. There was no way we could put more in. We wanted, the original design, I think we wanted 40 or 50 of them. But after we did a couple, we realized that was not going to happen.
Chatting with Shady Sands' highest elder, Aradesh, leans you in on the town's anxiousness of outsiders that we were just talking about a moment ago.
Shady Sands is much like a family, one that keeps to itself. But we do not trust easily, especially those who might be dangerous. Know that Seth and I will be watching you.
But he gives more details about the Rad Scorpions harassing the village, and so it was then that it began my first real test of combat. Or so I thought. So I'm playing the game on normal with relatively decent combat stats, and I'm fairly average at that, though I do have a good-natured perk which bumps me down on some combat skills, but at the same time I have the gifted perk which gives +1 to every special attribute, which is kinda OP. But I shudder to think about how brutally difficult it would be if I, 1, decided to allocate even more points away from combat, which I considered doing.
Your skill has
or
increased.
2, didn't have a companion. I just don't think I'd be able to do this quest yet, which, maybe is kind of the purpose. To let you solve the issues of the town and earn some XP if your build caters towards it. There's a similar situation on the eastern part of town where you can help out the town's agriculture if you have a high enough science skill by giving some tips to the local farmer. I knew from fighting the rats that I was still pretty weak, and it's part of why I didn't even try to fight the raiders yet. But to think that companions like Ian were basically a last-minute addition to the game makes me wonder if I wouldn't have bumped the difficulty down like a little sissy boy, because all I did was feed this man stim packs the whole time we were in that cave. And yup, you heard me right. The companions were basically a last-minute addition.
Followers were not in the original spec for the game, and we had no time to code it when the idea came up that, hey, why don't we have these guys follow you around and help you out, especially in tough areas. So the scripters on the team decided they could do it all in scripting. We put in a few, I think Dogmeat was the first one, and then we added Ian. We sent it to QA, and QA loved it. It tested really well. It's one of the best features we ever had, because people imagined that it was like this. This is what it was like when they were fighting through the wasteland with their follower. When in actuality, it was more like that. And if you ever had Ian in your group and you let him have the Uzi, he would shoot it in burst mode, and he didn't care where you were standing or where the other followers were standing. And we never fixed that because it wasn't done in code, and there was just no way to expose the appropriate AI to script. We literally didn't have the time to do it. So that's why the AI is what it is, and I'm kind of embarrassed about that.
Thankfully, I never gave you any Newsies, so
I don't
never
care
suffered
about
from
your
that issue too much.
AI in Fallout 1 in 1993. I don't care about that. That's okay. You guys did great.
Oh, but even if he did let some rounds fly in my face, he probably would have more than made up for it, considering I was only able to shoot the odd shot, accompanied with a quick stab if I was close enough whenever it was my turn. Whereas this guy was putting rounds into the scorpions like he unlocked an extended clip attachment, which just goes to show you how important AP is in this game, especially compared to the later games that solely use it for action shots and VATs. Not that I necessarily prefer it, but I want to re-emphasize the point of just how much easier I think it is to balance RPGs around turn-based action rather than first-person or third-person action. Balancing combat skills in FPS games when really the skill in combat mainly comes down to player aim has got to not only be extremely challenging for the dev team, but frustrating for the player. I mean, who wants their shots to miss when you put your crosshair perfectly over an enemy's face? I put a lot of points into the small guns class. I don't know if that was the name of it in New Vegas, but I've heard people refer to the accuracy in Fallout games as dice rolly. So I wonder how frustrated I'd be if I was aiming dead on and yet had half of my magazine bullets miss. That didn't really happen to me in New Vegas because, like I said, I put a lot of them towards small guns. It just seems easier for some reason to explain my character missing shots when it's turn-based combat. I think because so much is abstracted away when
Your skill has increased.
and when you're not directly in control of the gun. After taking care of the rad scorpions, the time creep started to resurface in my brain. I'd made some neighboring friends, but I needed to get back to the main task at hand, finding the water chip. We don't have many days to waste. Heading back to the Wasteland's Haven, I said goodbye to the people of Shady Sands. For now.
You are truly a hero. Know that the people of Shady Sands are most grateful.
Shady Sands.
Heading back to Vault 15, this time with a new friend by my side, I explored its bare remains thanks to the rope I bartered for. Now able to more easily kill some of the early game irradiated varmints, thanks to the XP I gained during my time at Shady Sands. You'll find a handful of helpful items that will surely help you on your travels, but after exhausting all 3 levels, you'll eventually learn that the chip is elsewhere. It's time to head back to Vault 13 and relay this news to the Overseer. Originally, prior to arriving at Vault 15, I hadn't planned on going to the Raider camp. I knew Shady Sands could have used the help, but the days kept ticking by, and more importantly, I didn't think I was strong enough yet. However, I did want to put my high speech to use, so I thought maybe there'd be a way to convince the Raiders to chill or something. I don't know, man. You never know with these games. So I saw it on the way back, and I was like, okay, let's go. And I went. I didn't expect nighttime in a pseudo-isometric sprite-based game to make me feel as tense as it does sometimes. But part of what adds to the tension is that there is some very mature material that I think a lot of companies, or at least the big ones, would be much more hesitant to put in their games these days due to fear of alienating or offending people. Seeing a room with a raider accompanied by...
I want to see Streets of Rogue review again.
With the amount of choices in front of you, but that feeling of shock would soon change to joy as you registered all the amazing creations you'd now get to try. You'd come back to that restaurant again and again because you'd want to try all the possibilities that lie ahead. In this scenario, Streets of Rogue would be like the most robust buffet you've ever seen. Every time you go to fill up your plate, you see a different scenario or a different combination you haven't tried. Even though each food on its own is interesting enough, most of the fun is seeing how these different flavors are going to work together. And Streets of Rogue gives you no shortage of flavors to choose from. Have you ever wanted a game where you could play as the Bloods, the Crips, a shopkeeper, an investment banker, a soldier, a thief, a custom, a bartender, a gorilla, an alien, a doctor, a bouncer, a courier, a robot, a zombie, a cannibal, a shapeshifter, a hacker, a firefighter, a slave master, mech pilot, demolitionist, jock, goon, slum dweller, cop, mobster, vampire, scientist, assassino, comedian, werewolf, or wrestler? Then look no further than Streets of Rogue. Each of these characters come equipped with their own unique stats, traits, abilities, and quests that help them feel unique from one another. Playing as the chloroforming pacifist doctor is going to play drastically different than the undead flesh-eating zombie or the explosive proficient demolitionist. Some characters will be frail and forced to rely on their special abilities to get the job done, like the hacker.
It's just, I wish it wasn't isometric, damn it. The idea sounds really good.
Thanks to Logitech G as an especially rotund
Thank you for Rock Paper Shotgun for the excellent content for every stream. I'd like to sub to your channel.
Rule for every scenario, an ability for every character archetype, and an item for every situation. That can end up limiting your creativity though, and you'll always encounter people who use those rules to power game, finally tuning the perfect character who does the best things in the most efficient way possible. The rules, despite their abundance, create tight pathways defined as the best and therefore only sensible way of playing. Some of the best tabletop RPGs, however, are what's called rules light. There are rules, yeah, but only the bare minimum you need to get the thing running. These games can tell you your core stats, some open-ended abilities, and some items that you have, but pretty much everything else is left entirely up to you. It's all driven by roleplay, what you as a player want to do. Instead of saying, I want to use my rage ability to double my damage and attack the boss, I roll 10 six-sided dice, I do this much, rules light games encourage you to describe how you attack the boss. How do you swing your weapon? Do you target any body part in particular? What expression do you pull when your blade meets their flesh? What guttural noise do you make? Or perhaps you don't attack the bad guy. Maybe you decide you met his grandmother at a quilting circle a few years back, telling me as her nose, and appeal to a sense of compassion to end things without bloodshed, just lots of tears and hugging instead. Now that's roleplay. Streets of Rogue embodies this open-endedness a lot throughout its runs. It is of course a lot more limited than a tabletop RPG. In those, your imagination is literally the only obstacle, and this is a video game that has to be programmed in a certain way. But it somehow manages to ignore that limitation in such a way that it feels like a rules-light video game. To explain what I mean by this, let me tell you a little bit about what myself and RPS Treehouse's Nate Crowley, Brendan Caldwell and Sin Vega got up to in a session that we had. In one run, I assumed the role of a mad scientist, and the other three were my small army of gorillas. The premise that we'd made for ourselves was that I had gone AWOL and decided to adopt a life of supercrime, genetically manipulating my gorillas so that they might perform terrifying feats to achieve my goals. The scientist class is given a water pistol. You can use it to short-circuit police robots and put out fires, I think, but you can also load them up with different poisons and medicines, despite the substances in question being ostensibly designed for injection or the like. I had a medicine called a giantizer, which makes people bigger. You can see where this is going. Except, it didn't go that way at all. I was having difficulty figuring out how to load the giantizer into my water pistol, and in the confusion, accidentally used it on myself. I got really massive and smashed my way through a prison. Whoops. As I shrunk, I stood quietly in amongst the rubble, wrought by my own hubris. Typical of an evil supervillain mastermind, I said, mistakenly using the inventions of themselves. Foolish! We tried again when we reached the next level, and besides me missing Sin and accidentally shooting Brendan twice, it worked! The gorillas got right massive, smashing up every building they could get their big furry digits on, while I skipped along in the wake of the carnage, cackling menacingly as I looted everything that wasn't nailed down like a right evil bastard. As Nate exclaimed once the deed was done, show me an Overwatch character who can do that. Our carnage ended up freeing another captive gorilla who attacked me whenever he saw me because scientists and gorillas are, as it turns out, sworn enemies. This gorilla later joined a gang because of economic disparity, we assumed. As a few floors in, he was following us around dressed in gang clothes and wielding a knife. Streets of Rogue is like a digital tabletop RPG session where every player is chaotic neutral. The game itself acts as a sort of dungeon master. But where other games' metaphorical DM's responses to the absurd requests of its players are met with a no but here's what you can do, Streets of Rogue follows a piece of essential advice given to people when they're learning how to run an RPG for the first time, one that the best DMs swear to. Instead of saying no but, Streets of Rogue says yes and. There's a specific tabletop RPG that I'd compare Streets of Rogue to, and I think it does a good job of communicating why I think rules-light, open-ended games are fantastic, and thus why Streets of Rogue is so great. Monster of the Week, which you might have heard of if you listen to the Adventure Zone podcast, is a system that puts storytelling over its rules and uses the latter simply as devices for that storytelling. While the Keeper, what the game calls the Dungeon Master, is ultimately the person in charge of rules, jurisdictions, and establishing obstacles for the players, Monster of the Week stresses that the telling of the story is collaborative. The Keeper is in charge of the rules, but every person sat around the table is the storyteller. Streets of Rogue feels very much the same way. The game is the keeper of the rules. It tells you what obstacle you'll face, and its algorithms impact the success of certain actions. But the story of Streets of Rogue isn't fed to us. It's one that we all tell through acting as players in the game. Matt Dabrowski gave us the lore, the backdrop, and the lines of code behind the scenes which set things in motion. But both the game and the people playing the game are the ones who decide the story being told within that world. To give an example of a moment in the game where this happened, in another run I had with the RPS Street Roguing crew, we all played as shapeshifters. Shapeshifters are tiny, fleshy, baby things with bare buns and horrifying, piercing red eyes. They're pretty weak as is, but their special ability allows them to sneak up behind any NPC in the game, bar other shapeshifters, and possess them, giving you access to the attributes and special abilities of whatever class they are. Something else that only shapeshifters can do is jump into toilets, flush themselves down the things, and emerge in the bowl of an
Streets of Rogue is a roguelike game, meaning you have to go through procedurally generated areas whilst completing various objectives in order to progress to the next floor, until you eventually reach the final floor, where your final objective will be to steal the mayor's hat and become mayor yourself. When first opening the game, if you just want to jump right into things, you can select Quick Start and then just select whatever character you wish to play as and get right into it. However, there are things we can do to make runs easier or harder if you so desire. And to access
Your skill has increased. Your skill has increased. Your skill has increased.
I'm gonna die. Oh well. Go run. Yeah, I wasn't paying attention. I don't know why you pulled that fucking crawler though. Why did we attack the crawler? God damn it. What's home to peace and prosperity? The city's falling into the hands. Oh, it's loud. It's loud. Gotta fix it. Gotta fix it. Loud. Okay. Yes, please. No, don't play sound minimized. Okay, so I don't care. I don't want the Twitch integration. I don't care about that. This is a 4-player game. gonna change my title here. I am off WoW. We're gonna play some FFXI Horizon. Streets of Rogue. First time / FFXI Horizon. And we'll go here and we'll say Streets of Rogue. Done. And then we come over and we see. I die while it was alt tabbed. It's so annoying. Audio's a bit too loud. guess. I think I enjoyed the other place better though. Play a couple nice. What? Oh, cool. I can reuse them. Reminds me of Hotline Miami a little bit. Okay, guys, I've been at this for 14 hours and 15 minutes. I'm going to stop. I am tired. It has been a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Thank you for paying attention to me. Uh, You have been watching Skycat Live. I am a full-time variety gamer all day, every day. Put me on in the background. Click on the cat's face to donate, and I'll be here all day tomorrow. This session that you just saw will be put on my stream here in just a few minutes. It'll be up within the next 12 hours, and you guys have a wonderful day. Click on the cat's face to donate. What am I forgetting? I'm sorry. And then this whole session will be on YouTube by tomorrow afternoon. That's all. And thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just kind of brain dead. Gotta go to bed now. Love you. See you tomorrow. Bye.